Okay, so I don't like, as a general rule, to do things that involve excess information, unneeded information. However, I am unable to find a simple 2-track recorder for Linux. Audacity is a hideous, counterintuitive monstrosity. I'm sure it's capable of doing a 2-track recording the way I want to do it, but figuring out how to make it do so is more trouble than I or anybody saner than an emu on acid should want to go through. And so we will use Kazam, my screen recorder, and we will upload it to YouTube.
Can just deal with his issues, then he'll become his kids.
I don't know how to respond to that saying that I need to make a huge apology. Because the truth is, I don't really want to ask a friend anymore. I'm not interested in apologizing to somebody who's a friend.
This has long been recognized. I just mention it because hope springs eternal, don't you know?
I've said that from the very beginning that I didn't need to send you the tape because I didn't know you were going to talk about Dad was going to talk about it. So, and then when I found out that they had, and I never told him about it because I don't know. It didn't really seem like that big a deal. He had said it. He says bad stuff about people all the time.
Okay, yeah, so first thing I want to mention is I must have mentioned approximately 250 billion times by now that, what? Here, press the pause on this while I think. Oh, yes, I have mentioned about 250 billion times, and Mr. Roberts has never once addressed, which is quite telling, the fact that it's a matter of the fact that Mr. Roberts used to know that there are certain things that we are conversing about amongst ourselves, he and I, that do not get spread to the person to whom they would be most likely offensive. The fact that he no longer does is why, and yes, I do realize that Mr. Roberts has rejected me, but that is why I reject him. I'd really like to see Mr. Roberts actually address this point, which, as I say, I've mentioned about 250 billion times, and he has never once addressed it. It seems to be a purposeful avoidance.
And then when I found out that they had, and I never told him about it because I don't know. I mean, it didn't seem like that big a deal. He has said it. He says bad stuff about people all the time.
Okay, yeah, let's address this. You know, I gave this some thought when you said it. Do I say bad stuff about people all the time? And the answer I've got to come up with, just from my point of view personally, is I say bad stuff about people more often than would a person who felt really horrible about being homeless, that he was scum and stuff like that. The older I get, the more of a warlock I become. I enjoy conflict. I enjoy defending myself to a marked degree. It's not to say I totally love it. It's not to say I will not avoid fights in certain situations. But, you know, I didn't come here to make peace when peace was not the right thing.
That's just Tad. Anytime there's any kind of conflict, Tad, he lashes out, stuff.
Okay, so I'm just going to say at this point, I've already addressed this point, and let's just see how long you're going to continue to try and make this point.
That's what he's going to do. That's just Tad.
La 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 la.
And I don't know what Tad feel about that. I think what Tad is wrong, but I don't think it's right. I think that Tad's very fair about it. Consider all shit Tad does. All the things he does, says. I think it's really surprising they got made but now accusing you of like other things, wasting his life, being evil in all kinds of ways.
See, you've said this about evil and stuff like 100 times. There may be a couple of exceptions, but I've never called you evil in all sorts of ways. Let's be brass tacks. I honestly believe that you're a sociopath. And I'm not the first person to come to that conclusion about you. But, and I'm gonna go ahead and say something that's going to trip something you say later in the tape. And we will get to that. But you're a member of one of those Abrahamic religions, and I think you like throwing around the word evil a lot. I don't. I use that word only on very special occasions.
It speaks to the sense that Tad's a little weak. But I know this is real.
Right. So you say it's my mental illness, so you don't know how to feel, blah, 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 blah. Anything so that you don't have to actually address me as an equal human with a valid opinion. Every time you say stuff like that, that's what you mean. So, bite me, as we would say in the 80s.
Happy he said the same thing about Elmer because Tad's bad stuff. Me, I tried my life and saved it because I it's like I had this idea that someday Tad to figure out what the hell is wrong and be like, wow, man, that's crazy. Like I've done a lot of like stuff for Tad and his friends for years. There's a part of me that's attached to recognize that, it's like a switch is my enemy for whatever calls his ass, and I'm nothing horrible, and I'm just accusing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so what appears to be that flipping a switch is the fact that in the past, like I say, there's this whole separate subject called Michael Roberts within the last 7 or 8 months or so. But in the past, it's always been worth it for me to put up with your absolute ignoramus opinion because there's enough cool about you, and because it would be too much of a pain in the ass to pause the conversation, considering how you would react, that it's been worth my while to just let you go on. And the flipping the switch is at the point when you've gone too far and you failed to recognize my boundaries.
Just because it's done so wrong. There's a part of things that not that hard things. I know Tad has no self-discipline. He doesn't have a lot of insight. So he's never going to make the change. I don't know that I would ever feel.
Yeah, that discipline, there's probably some point about that. About insight, the day when you are the one to judge whether or not I have insight is the day hell freezes over.
Definite about Task's character. If he had just said something to me, like when he said something about Bob, it was still like right around the grudge. Like you are ridiculous.
Well, like I say, there's a few things on that. One, I said nothing at first to indicate any kind of grudge. As I pointed out, used a common English expression. Give the devil his due. It means that although you may not exactly be brothers at arms with someone, you nonetheless grant them a point. Two, as I also pointed out, it was one of the more profound insults anybody has ever given anybody. And so if I hold a grudge on that, she's never taken it back. And in situations thereafter, instead of saying Ted is an absolutely great person, I don't know what's wrong with you for thinking otherwise, you did like a half-ass version. And that was only a few years ago. 7 or 8 years ago at most. And that's one of those things that I've been trying to talk about, dude, which is you've never thought much of me. You've always thought that I should be your inferior and that I should recognize such. And that was really cool for about 3 years because you were so much cooler than me in so many ways. But let's see, that would be 13, 14, 15. That means from about the age of 15 on, I've basically thought you were kind of an a-hole. You always had redeeming qualities that made up for the fact that you were kind of an a-hole. But you don't anymore, dude. And you've gotten worse and worse and worse. You have no redeeming qualities anymore that I consider valid and important.
It's been more than 20 years. And you're still holding on to that. Like, seriously? Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't think about it much. So I wouldn't say I'm holding on to that. It was what it was, it is what it is, and I never said anything at first until you called into question that should call to mind my assessment of your mother and what she said 20 years ago. Like I say, I don't know how you're not getting this, I used a common English expression.
Just ridiculous. But what he said to you was just like beyond the pale. Like it's not a politically correct joke. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Tad's gonna come offense.
I don't think I've ever referred to it as a joke.
I think he's gonna say something like, misinterpreted, he did something, or he's gonna end up using something or something. Oh, this is a scumbag anyway.
No, dude, it's worse than I think that you misinterpreted. I think you pretended to misinterpret. I think you knew what I meant from the get-go. Because as I pointed out, you have a worse opinion of females than do I. I just got caught, and I got caught because of a betrayal. Them's the norms, dude. That's what this whole thing is about. That's what this whole thing has been about. The fact that's just so... Oh, there's a word for it. Let me press that pause button while I think of what the word is. Okay, I never could think of that word. The words cavalier and draconian are close, but I just could not think of that word. I gave it a smoke's worth of time to think of it, and it would not come to mind. Let's continue with the recording.
Do something like that. But
okay, so no, I'm not. As I've already said, it was a mistake both ethically and strategically. However, there is a strong sense in which my mistake was due to your betrayal. My main mistake from my point of view, and I think it's a very valid point of view, was one of integrity. I allowed myself to go into your kind of headspace to try and make a point. And I should never have dropped my integrity like that. My opinion is that in most ways, shapes, and forms, females are our better half. And maybe that's what chicks dig about me, because it sure as hell ain't my looks.
I think zero chance Tad is just going to acknowledge what he did wrong and apologize and move on from there. I kind of feel like if Tad can do that, there might be some hope for his friend in the future. But I don't think he's going to do that. I'm pretty sure he can't. And I know that Tad can't have any kind of conversation about what he said being wrong. Because he just doesn't do it. So in a way, I'm kind of happy that he said that, because it makes it so much easier for me. Because I mean, I was okay with not talking to Tad for a while. Like him being out of my life doesn't bother me. Like there are times where talking to Tad would be cool, but it's just simply not worth it.
That's exactly how I feel about you, dude. There are times when it would be cool to talk to you, but it's simply not worth it. And that's because we have some serious disagreements that are going to be addressed here fairly soon, because you bring it up. And I'm going to give you much more than you want, but you're just going to have to live with it, because that's what I'm going to do.
I mean, Tad always says, Mason me, scumbags from home, blah, blah, blah. It's none of those things.
Actually, really, that is what it is. And you've come, 85% to admitting it. And for the part that you haven't yet admitted, there's just no question in my mind, having known you for all these years, that if I were, for instance, a more successful person than you would think entirely differently about my behavior. I'm sure you'll deny it until you turn blue in the face, but there's absolutely zero question in my mind about this.
The negative things I think about Tad's actions. Tad changed his actions. I would think negatively about it. It's that simple. The fact that he can't do it, that's another issue. Kind of sad. Talking about my mom, shit about me.
Yeah, like I say, I never talked crap about your mom, dude. I used a common English expression. I've explained to you what it means about 4 times now. Since you clearly, apparently, don't understand this common English expression. Do you think it a debatable point that your mom and I don't exactly see eye to eye on everything? Okay, then give the devil his due is a quite appropriate thing to say when we agree on a particular point. I'm What are you smoking and where can I get some, dude?
And then just being completely illogical. Telling me that I'm doing some bizarre thing, trying to convince you it doesn't suck. I mean, that's just not okay. Right? But telling you that you have to feel a certain way about the dude who roped you as a kid. That's not sexual harassment. That's a way bigger thing. That's being a pedophile or being like a creepy child molester or something.
Okay, no. So let's make this point perfectly clear. If Mr. Blanton is guilty of some kind of crud of the sort described against Lisa, then clearly that's very, very, very wrong. I'm just saying, if Lisa comes down on your side rather than mine, considering the fact Mr. Blanton was never formally accused in a court of law, and considering the fact that I have some positive experiences with Blanton. I have some experiences that indicate he is a fine judge in the field of library science and or literature. I could get specific, but I doubt it would be anything in which you're particularly interested. I have some pleasant experiences with Blanton. I used to hang out a lot. Maybe you even remember this, Mike. I used to hang out in the library after school because my parents did not get home from work until late. And it was a fine and fun thing to do. Got to hang out with a guy you may have never met whose nickname was Stork because he could act like a stork. Watch him play some interesting games that are probably no longer remembered by anybody. I don't even remember the title of one of the coolest ones. So just in general, I have a lot of positive feelings about Mr. Blanton, and I was kind of hurt when I heard that Lisa has an accusation against the guy because, like I say, my experiences with him have been basically positive. He was a rather stern fellow, but let's face it, our group of nerds loved hanging out with each other, and we were kind of obnoxious in the library, and we all enjoyed making fun of Blanton. Poor old Elmer. And but when it came right down to it, he was pretty cool. That was my assessment. If it turns out he did the things that Lisa says he did, then of course I take that back.
Like that's just wrong. For him to have that stance is just mind blowing. Like he says a lot of stupid shit all the time. Like that's just how that is. Grandiose. With you, left thinking, right? We're gonna talk about some political theory, blah 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 blah. That's one thing. I mean, in his response where he's like, that's what is proud of the law through the Abrahamic religion. It's like Tad really sounds like that dude on The Simpsons. The fat dude who's balding, who's always talking about Star Trek. That is incorrect. In episode 47, Kirk is clearly holding the phaser in his left hand, and then later he's holding the phaser in his right hand. Are we to believe Kirk is dexterous?
So, before I get into this, what, you hate nerds?
The first captain of the dude. It's like, dude, nobody cares. Right? He wants to make everything about this grand, big, huge, grand thing. You don't understand who Michael does love, and you're gonna damage your eternity.
Okay, so I guess you might go on with this crap even more. Part of me strongly fears that the majority of females would be unable to appreciate a person who is abstract and or intellectually inclined. I suppose what I am finding myself to be more and more, and in more and more aspects of my life, to the point where I'm ending the lack of integrity that made me duplicitous, I believe is the correct word, on the subject, is an advocate of popular philosophy as that which counteracts the habitual idiocy of the three Abrahamic religions, which is one of the aspects of popular philosophy. It began with Socrates. So if you have any issues with that, please take it up with him, which will be difficult as he has been dead now for about 2,500 years. I honestly believe it's possible you don't know the story of Socrates. And this is that part where I said I'm going to go into it more than you probably want by a large deal. I'm going to tell you the basic story of Socrates. Socrates went around debating with people throughout ancient Greece. Not so much debating. I don't think there was any such thing as debating. But we get the word Socratic method from what he was doing, which was questioning people's strong-held beliefs, which is the basic nature of philosophy in general. This is Philosophy 101. Question your assumptions. And I do believe it's literally taught. It's basically, I do believe it is literally the only thing taught in Philosophy 101. They pretend they're teaching you a whole bunch of stuff, but they're really teaching you one thing. Question your assumptions. And popular philosophy, I'm going to go way out on a limb and say popular philosophy is the philosophy that ended basically with Socrates and Plato. We even have a little bit of trouble with Aristotle. Kind of an arrogant guy, Aristotle, I think. It doesn't sit right with us. So, yes, he went around Greece challenging people's assumptions using the Socratic method, which was basically to ask questions, pretend he didn't have an answer at first, and then through what we would now call debate, I suppose, show a clearer example. Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth, and he defended himself in court but was found guilty, and they sentenced him to death. But they didn't really mean it. And his friends came and told him that there was actually a ship that would take him to a foreign land if he would just be a little sneaky and take this offer of help from friends to avoid taking the punishment dealt out by the Greek people. And Socrates basically said, "No, dude, they decided what they decided. I would have wished that they would have decided something else." And this is one of the reasons why Socrates he was a legend in his own time. He was called the greatest of Athenians, and that is probably why. Actually, he was called the greatest of Athenians before that. I skipped a step. Socrates consulted the oracle at, I believe, Delphi, and the Delphian oracle called him the greatest man in Greece, and that was what started him on his philosophical career. His greatest enemy was the sophists. His greatest enemy philosophically was the sophists, whom he felt and whom we now say we agree with, even though there are occasionally challenges to this notion, because that's the nature of philosophy. Challenge your assumptions, even assumptions about the sophists. Was that sophists used trick arguments, and for the most part, that is the great stance of philosophy is to discover people who are using trick arguments and handle that crap. So Socrates died by drinking hemlock. He is sometimes compared to Jesus of Nazareth as another person who submitted perfectly. While he was dying, he was quite pleasant, had no fear of dying whatsoever. The last words out of his mouth was something like, "I owe a chicken to Whoozawetta. Please make sure he gets it." And he died of hemlock poisoning. Okay, and I realize you're going to think I'm so arrogant for telling you the story of Socrates, but I honestly believe you may have never heard of it. So just in case you haven't, I'm going to tell it. This is how I see myself to a large degree. I'm becoming less duplicitous about it, less apologetic. You know that very early on I was compared to Socrates. I was called the Socrates of gelatos, you remember? All right, here we go then.
Sure, dude. I particularly like that little thing that he wrote. It doesn't make any sense. You don't know. If you don't know. By now, you're going to damage your eternity. Because I think you're worth it. And also, if you think this is bad, it's bad.
Okay, so let me. You separated those concepts other than was my intention. Yes, I honestly believe that Lisa will be damaging her eternity if she decides that you are the better human than me in relationship to this argument or in relationship to anything else. It comes down to shallowness versus depth, which, as I've said, I've never been able to go find, but I know them when I see them. If Lisa decides that it couldn't possibly be that you have a lesser opinion of females, even though I'm the guy that got caught, then yeah, I will have to decide that she's got a lot of work to do. She's ignoring a great deal. She would be ignoring a great deal of very relevant data if she were to fail to recognize this. And so I myself will not mince words. I myself will be bold. I will say she is damaging her eternity. The reason why I'm making my arguments, even though this should have been clear. I have no reason to argue with you anymore, Mr. Roberts, other than to get Lisa on the correct page. And my purpose in getting Lisa on the correct page is that I honestly fear for her sanity, her eternity, her future life, if she has anything to do with you in the future. You gave her a $249 phone? Okay, while she was kissing your ass in the realm of photography? She probably also genuinely likes photography. It is not too incorrect to say that you're a pretty good photographer. Photographers are kind of a dime a dozen, in my opinion. There's probably 10 photographers worth talking about alive at any given time. Correct me if I'm wrong here, and this will be a big mistake if I am. This was an old phone. You got a new phone. This was an old camera. You got a new camera you liked better, and you gave it to her. It's not like you went and bought her a $249 camera, unless I've got something wrong. And boy, I will really be suffering from foot in the mouth if I have, but I don't think I do.
That sentence doesn't even make sense.
Hopefully it does now. I don't know how it didn't, but hopefully it does now.
Thinking it's a weakness, knowing your mindful of your opportunities. There's a reason why none of these things make sense. There's a reason why logical arguments for all the weird things that it says.
So, in other words, la-di-da, la-la-la-la-la. All right, that's my argument, and them's the numbs.